ChatGPT has recently taken the world by storm. Everyone seems to be using it now, and it is definitely a technology that is going to revolutionize our lives. This got me thinking about another new and revolutionary technology, Bitcoin. So I decided to ask ChatGPT if it thinks Bitcoin will hit $1 million, and it actually gave some pretty interesting answers. But before we ask ChatGPT anything about Bitcoin's price, we need to see how well informed it really is when talking about Bitcoin. Will it really be able to give us any information on what Bitcoin is and how it works? So I started with something simple. What is Bitcoin? And it spit out a fairly typical response, but it explained what the point of Bitcoin was, and even mentioned that its creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, could have been one person or possibly a group. So it has been trained on the subject, but I wanted to go a bit deeper. So I asked it, how does Bitcoin work? To see if it could really explain any of the intricacies to me. Not only could it describe how Bitcoin works, it was able to do so in one of the most clear and concise ways I have ever read. Clearly, ChatGPT has seen a lot of info that relates to Bitcoin and how it works. And honestly, if you want a basic understanding of how Bitcoin works, you can't get much better than what is said here. And I could have it elaborate and go in more depth, but I think we should keep moving forward and ask it some more interesting questions. So next I'm going to ask it how Bitcoin differs from other cryptocurrencies. Because Bitcoin is in a lot of ways very different from other cryptocurrencies. It was the first cryptocurrency and literally spawned the entire cryptocurrency space. And it just does a lot of things other cryptos don't. So I want to see if ChatGPT can really pick up on those nuances. And once again, it went above and beyond. Instead of giving me just some quick, simple answer, it gave me 6 fairly in-depth bullet points about how Bitcoin really is different. First, it mentions that Bitcoin is not only the first, but also the largest cryptocurrency. It also mentions how Bitcoin is decentralized, which some cryptocurrencies are not, or at least not to the same extent as Bitcoin. It says Bitcoin is limited by its 21 million coin cap, which is true. Then it mentions that Bitcoin uses advanced cryptography to secure transactions and protect users' assets, which is also true. Bitcoin does do that, but I'm pretty sure most cryptocurrencies do that, so I don't think that should necessarily be a difference. Then it mentions how Bitcoin uses proof of work, and this is a good thing to bring up because pretty much every other cryptocurrency is using proof of stake at this point, so it's a very notable difference. And then last it brings up popularity, which is kind of a rehash of its first point, but still valid, even if it is a bit repetitive. I think the most important part of this whole response, however, is the final sentence, which reads, while other cryptocurrencies may offer similar features, they often differ in terms of their overall design, target audience, and development goals. This is a super important thing to realize if you are interested in crypto. Not every cryptocurrency is even trying to tackle the same problems as Bitcoin, and the fact that ChatGPT brings that up shows it is able to give some really good information about Bitcoin. So far, ChatGPT has been very impressive with the information it has given us, and honestly, it has done better than I really expected. But next, I want to ask it a more philosophical question. Is Bitcoin good? This will help give us a good idea of what it could be taken into account when we finally ask it if Bitcoin could hit $1 million. The response it gave to this question was very long, and ChatGPT didn't really take a side. Instead, it decided to give us a list of pros and cons against Bitcoin. And yeah, it's kind of dancing around the question, but I feel that it is fair to answer it this way. It does give a good list of pros and cons, but like the other question, I feel like the last sentence it gives us is very insightful. Overall, Bitcoin is a highly innovative technology that has the potential to disrupt traditional financial systems. However, it is not without its risks and challenges, and whether or not it is a good investment or a use case depend on each individual's unique situation and risk tolerance. So yeah, there is a lot to Bitcoin, and while it has the potential to disrupt traditional financial institutions, nothing is guaranteed. I think the big takeaway here is that it doesn't instantly dismiss Bitcoin as some overtly evil technology, but I do want to try one more thing before I ask it the big question. I want to ask it if Bitcoin is bad for the environment, because this is one of the biggest concerns that many people have about Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses proof of work, which does use a lot of electricity to keep the network secure, so it'll be interesting to see how it navigates this hard question. And it answers with a resounding yes, at least at the beginning of its response. It goes on to say how Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy and why it uses that energy. It also mentions the fact that as time goes on, the energy consumption of the Bitcoin network is likely to increase. But the last 2 paragraphs of its response are a bit more optimistic about the future of Bitcoin mining. It goes into how there are many efforts underway to make Bitcoin mining more sustainable and efficient. The last paragraph reads, in conclusion, the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining is a significant concern that needs to be addressed. However, with the right investments and technological advancements, it may be possible to make the process more sustainable in the future. So we know now that ChatGPT has mostly taken a neutral stance to Bitcoin. So it's time to ask it the question we've all been waiting for. Will Bitcoin hit $1 million? And it mostly gave me a response that is the equivalent of, I don't know. Now, it did throw in some interesting things like how some people feel like it can hit 1 million and others think it definitely can't. It also mentions that this is something that is really hard to predict, which is true, but I wanted a real answer out of ChatGPT, so I had to think of a more creative way to ask the question. I tried several different questions with fairly similar results, but then I had an idea. I couldn't keep trying to ask it if Bitcoin will hit $1 million because it clearly wasn't going to give an answer on that, probably for legal reasons. Instead, I could ask it how Bitcoin could hit $1 million, and as soon as I did that, I once again got an extremely thorough response. It explained with another bullet point list how exactly Bitcoin could hit $1 million, and I think all 5 things mentioned here are great things to take into account when thinking about if Bitcoin could hit a price target as high as $1 million. It brings up the fact that the adoption and usage of Bitcoin needs to increase a lot, which is fairly obvious, but also very true. It also makes a very valid point that Bitcoin needs to be recognized more widely as a store of value, and when I think that this is happening, it needs to happen on a much larger level than it is today, because that in turn would increase demand for Bitcoin. Its third point mentions how Bitcoin needs favorable regulatory developments, meaning governments and other large entities need to make laws and rules that encourage or at least give the okay for others to invest in Bitcoin. This would allow people to feel more confident about purchasing or using Bitcoin because it would be clear that the government isn't just going to ban it out of nowhere. The fourth thing mentioned is improved scalability and efficiency, which has been a long debated topic in the Bitcoin space. And to go into depth in that would need to be a whole other video. But the good news is that things seem to be getting better on this front. For example, the Lightning Network has become the go-to solution for allowing Bitcoin to handle more transactions. And last but not least is the limited supply of Bitcoin, which in itself doesn't give Bitcoin value, but since there are only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins, if the other things mentioned by ChatGPT do pan out, then that limited supply is going to make the Bitcoins that do exist be in much higher demand. Then ChatGPT ends the response with a disclaimer that it always seems to give when asking about Bitcoin's future price, explaining that cryptocurrencies are risky and that the future price of Bitcoin can't be predicted with any certainty. So all in all, I think this is a pretty good response. Now, if you really wanted to, you could ask it to elaborate and go into more specifics, but it definitely isn't necessary. I think it's important to remember that while ChatGPT is very powerful, it isn't some all-knowing, omnipotent being. It has just been trained on a lot of data and is able to chat with you based on what it has been trained on, so you aren't going to get a response on the future price of Bitcoin, even if it could really give you an exact number. Instead, I think it's good to use ChatGPT more as a way to learn information about things like Bitcoin. Throughout making this video, I was thoroughly impressed by what it was able to explain to me with just a simple question. Some of the responses here were better put together than anything else I've read online, so if you have any simple or even hard questions, ChatGPT may be able to help you understand something better, or at the very least point you in the right direction. And the great thing is that it can carry on a conversation, so you can ask it to go in depth about stuff it just mentioned, something you can't easily do with a basic Google search. So yeah, ChatGPT is impressive and it is a really promising technology. If you want to learn more about another promising technology, Bitcoin, why not check out my video where I go into depth on why Bitcoin is so resilient despite its many critics.